good. Definitely, this one is in the vein of that, just with the shot choices and colors and everything. I love that it was set in Las Vegas. It's a fun film.
Okay.
I don't know if you believe me, or I know you said that, and I've heard this too from other people, that it's overly long, but in my opinion, I felt like it was justified. You don't really feel the length.
Mm-hmm.
The pacing is, at least I thought, was done well. So if you guys trust me out there, you should check it out if you haven't already.
Well, you and I sometimes disagree, but I do trust your recommendations.
Thank you.
I know that you usually will recommend something that you feel I'll like, or at least give it a chance.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I guess the end of our recs, and we can move into our main focus if you're ready, my man.
Yeah, right on. Let's do it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now for the movie focus of the week.
All right. Hopefully I can do this some bit of justice, since I know you're a huge fan of Ghostbusters. But so this week, your takeover, you wanted to talk about the original Ghostbusters film, which seems to mean a lot to you. I know we've seen it at least once in the theater together for an anniversary.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely, we'll talk about that. That was one of my favorite times going to the movies.
Oh yeah, but it's so it's rated PG, which is crazy, just like Jaws. It's from 1984. It's a fantasy comedy film. It runs at 1 hour and 47 minutes, and it's got a well-deserved 97 on Rotten.
Damn straight it does.
Directed by Ivan Reitman, written and directed by the late Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, starring Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Rick Moranis, Annie Potts, and Sigourney Weaver. The film follows a group of scientists or parapsychologists who start up an independent paranormal investigation unit after being let go from their New York University jobs. They then are tasked with closing a portal to another dimension and stopping the evil Gozer. The original Ghostbusters film has continued to cement itself within pop culture since its release on June 8th, 1984, being one of the very first comedies to blend horror elements with multiple big-budget special effects. Originally conceived by Dan Aykroyd as a time-traveling film, where he and his Blues Brothers partners, John Belushi and Eddie Murphy, would journey through time and space to battle supernatural forces. But the sudden death of Belushi and Reitman's huge concerns with Aykroyd's script being too ambitious and expensive for its time led him to team up with Harold Ramis to create a more grounded approach to the Ghostbusters, and the rest is history. With the film bringing in a whopping $295 million against a $30 million budget, it ended up becoming one of the highest grossing comedies of the 80s, which led to a spin-off cartoon series titled The Real Ghostbusters that ran from 1986 to 1991. The reason for the odd title was due to a legal dispute for another cartoon which already carried the Ghostbusters title. Although the cartoon was a huge success in its own right with a massively successful toy line, the series title was again changed to Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters in 1988, as the villain Slimer from the first film was then turned into an ally for the team. This also was an effort to make the show even more kid-friendly and less scary. However, the show's run did stay on track, with the movie making numerous references throughout the seasons. This led us to the sequel release in 1989, which saw the return of the original cast but ultimately failed in gaining the same fandom and praise that the original did. After the Ghostbusters property lay dormant until 97, which brought us to the Extreme Ghostbusters cartoon, where the crew had all disbanded except for Egon, who then recruits a few of his students to take on the role as the new Busters. The show also stayed true to the events in the previous cartoon, but was cancelled after just one season. Between the late 90s and now, there's been a slew of video game adaptations and comic books based in the universe of the Ghostbusters, but the best so far has to be Ghostbusters the video game from 2009, which had the original actors lend the voices for the project, and as if that wasn't enough, the story was derived from a scrapped screenplay of Ghostbusters 3 Hellbent. The game was actually just recently remastered and released for the current next-gen consoles as well, for anybody interested out there. This leads us to the reboot, which swapped out the gender of the leads, and much like the second film, failed to gain much traction, but with another reboot titled Ghostbusters Afterlife, due to be released in June of this year, this time with Jason Reitman in the director's chair, maybe, just maybe, the franchise can achieve some much-needed success. Until then, who are you going to call? Thank you.
That was good, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's good. I always look forward to the write-ups. I know I tell you that every time, but I do. It's true.
So, man, what do you want to talk about? Or first and foremost, I want to hear, like, what does this movie mean to you? What's your attachment to it? What do you remember the first time seeing it?
Absolutely, I do. This is where my attachment stems from. I have my mother to thank because I don't think she knew very much about the movie, and she took me to see it for the first time when it came out. So, in 1984, I was starting kindergarten.
Okay.
As established before on the show, I am old. So, in 1984, I'm starting kindergarten, and the big movie that summer was Ghostbusters. And on that first day, it was basically just like a half a day. You know, the parents are there with the kids kind of getting introduced to everyone and the teacher, and then, you know, at noon, everyone goes home. Well, my mom was with me. She was the one that went with me to that orientation day. And then afterwards, we went to go have lunch, and then she took me to see Ghostbusters because she, I think, was under the impression that it's a kids' movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as you pointed out in your write-up, it was PG because this was before the advent of PG-13. And takes me to see it, and I have a blast. I think it's great. And I think as she's watching it, she's realizing that all the cursing and the casual smoking and the sexual innuendo and the scary stuff, because there's some pretty scary stuff in that movie for a 4-year-old. I think she's realizing that this might not have been the greatest movie to take a 4-year-old to.
Yeah.
So I wish I could go back to that moment now and just look over at her and kind of like gauge what she was thinking throughout the movie. But I loved the movie so much when I was a kid. I was so excited about it. The only thing that I had trouble with for a while was the scene in Sigourney Weaver's apartment where the arms come up out of the chair.
Yeah.
And grab her. That was always the part that scared the shit out of me when I was younger. So even for like a decade or so after that, I would always close my eyes in that scene because it would really freak me out. But everything else was great. I, for years, told her, because she was like, "Oh, I don't know if I should have taken you to see that." You know, she tells me this later on. You know, when I'm much older, she's like, "Oh yeah, I wasn't sure if that was the right choice for a movie to take you to." You know, after watching it, and I had to always tell her, "No, that was great. Like, I loved that movie so much. I was so excited watching it. It was awesome because everyone I knew had seen it, so it was just awesome being a part of that." And I was always very thankful that she took me to that movie that day. To the point even that when she passed away and I was writing her eulogy, I thought that I was going to reference Ghostbusters in the eulogy and how grateful I was that she took me to see that movie. Because it is hands down like a desert island movie for me. If you told me that I was going to be stranded on a desert island for the rest of my life and could only see one movie or just a few movies, Ghostbusters would probably be one of them. I love it that much. I grew up watching it. It's now, what, 37? 37? Maybe, yeah, 37 years old?
Almost 40.
Yeah. Yeah, almost 40 years old in a few years. Crazy. But this is one of my all-time favorite movies. I've seen it more times than I could count. It's probably in triple digits by now. I mean, hell, I just watched it 3 times this week in prep for the show, and it never gets old. So thank you for letting me break down Ghostbusters. This is one I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I'm sure it's been done plenty of times before, but not by you and I. So thank you for allowing me to talk about it.
Of course, man. Anytime. Thank you for choosing me to do it with. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But you mentioned in your introduction that you and I watched this during the re-release, the 30th anniversary re-release.
We did.
You had obviously seen that movie before, right?
Yeah. I obviously there's which we've talked about numerous times, probably on the show and off the show. There's a big age gap between you and I, but nonetheless, I was raised by my grandparents, so yes, we did have the VHS tapes for 1 and 2 in the house all the time, and I remember even my sisters watching those tapes over and over and over again. So yeah, it's just a staple, I think, in pop culture, and probably a lot of households. I would think.
I would think so too. It's a great movie. I mean, it works really well as kind of a supernatural sci-fi movie, but it's also just an amazing comedy. There's so many funny lines in the film, and just funny situations in the film, but it just doesn't feel like an outright comedy because you have all the ghost stuff in it as well.
Yeah, and these are guys that are, how do you say it? Like, they're well off. They're not just like some Joe Schmoes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I guess you take them or you're supposed to kind of take them very seriously. And it's interesting because from the research that I did in Dan's original script, where there were going to be intergalactic Ghostbusters, that was supposed to be a lot more real, not realistic, but a lot more serious in tone and not much comedy.
Yes, and I read that that original draft of the screenplay is not only serious but much scarier than what ends up on screen here. But you mentioned in the introduction that it was much too expensive to produce, and probably not able to make that type of movie because of where special effects were at that time. It probably wouldn't have come out nearly as good. And honestly, like, that sounds interesting, like the original idea. But man, I cannot imagine it being as good as this.
No, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but that original treatment seemed more like a good maybe TV series like